Today we're chatting with the host of Insights to Live By about making positivity a reflex, leaning toward optimism, earned confidence, staying grounded, self-belief, winning the battle within, and inevitability thinking, among many other things. You definitely don't want to miss this one. So don't you change that dial or drop that phone. We're about to level it up and shatter the mold. Question. In a world where groupthink is the norm, others want what you've earned, and thinking for yourself will get a target painted on your back, how do you flip the script and level up your business, your money, relationships, your health, your status, and your life? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Andrew S. Kaplan, and it's time to shatter the mold. Welcome to another episode of Shatter the Mold. Andrew S. Kaplan, really excited to be here with you today. We've got an awesome guest. We're going to go down so many different roads. But before we get there, quick update on the last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read. Continues to stick around on the charts, a #1 bestseller in multiple categories on Amazon. And I'm super grateful for all the 5-star rave reviews and all the emails that people send in, letting me know how you're liking the content and how you are implementing it in your life. Thank you so much. And of course, welcome to anyone that found out about it through the Yahoo article last year, or the USA Today article this year, or the Forbes article this year, or if a friend told you, or any other way. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for checking out the book. And for anyone that has not had the chance to check out the book yet, you can feel free to go to lastlawofattractionbook.com, and that'll auto forward to the Amazon listing where you can get it in Kindle or paperback or audiobook if you prefer. And if you don't want to pull out your wallet, you can very easily just go to youtube.com/AndrewCap. That's KAP. And you can check out the free content devoted to the book instead. And, it's got free new techniques. It's got some featured LOA expert interviews and a few other surprises. With that said, speaking of surprises, we've got a lot of fun surprises in store in this upcoming conversation here. So I'm going to switch up mics and we're going to begin our conversation with Matt. Today, we've got another awesome guest, and I'm really excited where this conversation might go. Matt Zinman, he's the author of Z-isms. He's the host of Insights to Live By. He's also a nonprofit founder, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And he describes himself as a happiness mindset innovator, which, I'm sure there's a lot going on there. And I'm sure we're going to learn a lot through the description of that. But, I'm actually reading a lot of this off his Instagram profile because I love the way a lot of times people condense what they do there as a jump off point. So with that said, let's dive on in. Matt Zinman, thank you so much for being here, my friend, and welcome to Shatter the Mold.
Andrew, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, pleasure's all mine. And it's like, I don't even know where to begin. I guess let's lead with that one piece where people are probably wondering about the most. When you say happiness mindset innovator, what do we mean by happiness? Where are we going with that?
Sure. Well, at the foundation of Z-isms, is a whole set of principles around mindset, and happiness is one that actually evolved over time, even after the book and into the work around the podcast and more recently the courses. And what it really speaks to is the opportunity to choose to respond to real-time events with a reflex of positivity, in the sense that whatever is going on, any circumstances, optimism and pessimism apply to the very same set. So that lends itself to that choice, and the fact that also some other principles we can get into that help us stay grounded in the present and just deal with the real. That means that you're living in the now, and as things occur, you're seeing things through that lens of happiness to choose positivity in every case as a reflex.
Cool. So I'm going to go a little deeper with that because hearing you say that, first of all, it resonates a lot. And it really connects with me because, like, often when I'm on a podcast being interviewed, and, obviously I've been talking a lot about my book and people ask me about my approach and all these pieces, and they have a certain expectation over, a law of attraction author. I'm very quick to point out that I'm a strategy guy. It's all about what you can you strategically do that's going to invite better circumstances. And what I hear from you saying that is the whole thing about leaning towards optimism versus pessimism is it's not just for a better life experience, but it's better also strategically to invite more. Whereas if you're thinking positively, it isn't just about thinking, oh, look at these fairies and butterflies and rainbows and sunshine and cotton candy.
Right,
It's
right.
I'm feeling good because I know when I'm feeling good, I'm going to be more composed. I'm going to be calmer. I'm going to make sound decisions. I'm going to make better decisions. I'm not going to panic. I'm going to see things in a whole new light. I'm going to see the chessboard a lot more widely. This is my interpretation. As I say that, how does that resonate or land with what your feelings are about the term happiness and about this strategy?
Sure. Well, I think you're spot on. And yeah, I mentioned, and I think it's a good opportunity to revisit the concept of earned confidence, which is actually my chapter one. And it speaks to another basic concept, some of which you just described, which is the fact that we've all been through everything we've been in our lives. You and I, we're having this conversation. All of us we're still standing, right? So it reasons to the point that we have proven to ourselves that we are fully capable of overcoming whatever comes our way in real time.
Mm.
So that, particularly when it comes to as a grounding principle for remaining present, reminds you you don't have to worry or be anxious or stress about things that are uncertain to happen, because you're automatically putting whatever negativity into something that ultimately may not occur. So you can then just deal with the real and rely on that earned confidence to stay grounded, so that as events then do occur in real time, that's when your reflex of happiness and positivity kicks in.
Yeah, hearing this, it really speaks to me more also to, the meaning that we place into things and the impact that that meaning has. Because, you go on a good date, for example, and you text the person back the next day and you don't hear back and you're like, oh my God, this person hates me. Not realizing that they were in a car wreck and they never got the message and they would have gotten right back. And then it's a whole different can of worms and different things. But it's amazing what we don't know what's happening in the background and we're making our interpretations. Hence, again, when you have that more positive perspective, it helps you make better decisions as you move forward. And I do love the idea of earned confidence. Now, earned confidence and the way you put that, you also talk about like Zisms. That's the name of your book, which I assume
Right.
is, because Zinman, Z, the things that you would say. Is earned confidence a concept within Zisms, or is it a Zionism itself?
Yeah, well, I'll back up a half step, and it's funny that the origin, what a Zism is, which is often an initial question I get, is basically a life lesson. Those pearls of wisdom we all have that that we can and do share with others to help improve one another's lives. And that was certainly a lot of the rationale behind the book. The subtitle is Insights to Live By, as you mentioned, the same name of my podcast. And by any other name, those are your Z-isms. A lot of people think of isms as quips and quotes, and certainly there are call outs and concepts like earned confidence that apply. But of course, Andrew, it's a fully fledged book. And at the same time, it is important to make those highlights along the way. And earned confidence is one of the key grounding principles behind it. And it does come from a lot of life experience. And in this case, and just a slight digression, is that when I was in my mid 20s, um, my mom, we discovered, had a terminal illness, unfortunately, and it's now just past 25 years since
Wow.
she's gone. So this is not recent, but certainly at the time it was very harrowing. And of course, as you go through that process, and there are times, and everyone goes through this in one way, shape, or form in their life, that you have to just deal with the real. Because if you get caught up in the anguish of what might be, and then realize, in this case, we thought we'd lose her a number of times, and then she'd pull through, thank goodness. Uh, but then you put yourself through that anguish. So the earned confidence, really, with and honoring her, is where that originated from. And it's just
Mm.
one of those things that has always served me well, and it was a major impetus for my writing the book, and why it's chapter one.
Mm. It sounds to me like one, among many things you were trying to help people with is helping them cultivate emotional resiliency.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah, the winning the battle within that we all constantly are challenged with, and how do you do that? And you mentioned before, the hopefully that car wreck did not happen in real life, but that's an assumption. So it's the
Yes.
same thing along the lines of, anxiety and worry, to catch yourself, to train yourself around that reflex, so that when you find yourself getting caught up in those things and assumptions in that same category of something that is uncertain or
Yes.
uncertain to happen, you could say, well, this, I don't know for sure. This is for real. So, with your own confidence, I'll say it again, just deal with the real.
Yeah, I can think back to times in my life where I was worried about something happening and it would ruin my whole day. It would kill my whole productivity. And here's the funny thing. Obviously, everyone's expecting me to say it didn't happen, and most of the time it didn't. But even the times when it did happen, it was still a complete waste of energy to be worrying about beforehand because there was nothing I can do until it happened in that context, in that situation. So no
Nice.
matter what, I cost myself a day of productivity, a day of happiness, a day of growth, a day of learning, allowing some issue to live rent free in my head.
Yeah, it's a fine line. It's not to say that, through experiences, we can anticipate, we can trust our intuition. And and you do find yourself getting into the what ifs. And sometimes that's okay. As long as you're detached from getting caught up in the as if.
Mm-hmm.
And that way, when you, through your experience, did correctly predict something was going to happen, it's good to give it some forethought about how you would react because you're training that reflex in advance. But how you would react with that happiness mindset. What would be your positive reflex if something you anticipate or are concerned about actually happens? How are you going to make the best of that? How are you going to not let it ruin your day if and when it happens? And look, you're compartmentalizing. You're being very cerebral about this as opposed to, keeping it in your head instead of, coursing through your negative feelings. But that's the practice of it. It's a
Mm-hmm.
skill that we all have to keep getting better at.
Love it. Now, I want to dive a little more into things that you're doing, but before we get there, I did want to
Sure.
highlight you are a nonprofit founder, and we were talking before we hit the record button. Obviously, COVID has changed the ways the world is operating.
Right.
That's, I would say it's helped you make this decision that at least for now you're going to pivot into this. But before we get there, like, what inspired you to do a nonprofit? What how'd you go in that direction, and what are you still doing in any way, shape, or form regarding the nonprofit?
Yeah, well, there's a whole journey there for sure. I mean, my original foray into entrepreneurship goes back to 2002 and my initial career in communication, public relations, and founding my own agency, getting an anchor client, doing that for a few years. And in that business, I'm sure you're billing by the hour. I was a single dad at the time. You can only get ahead so much. All of those, and I was looking for where my experience and passion and skills align with what I saw to be a market opportunity. And for me, it was in and around the field of internships and the great gaps that I recognized through those experiences between the schools and the employers, or the employers don't know what they're doing. And so it started out with my developing intellectual property uh, around the, building the wheel. Essentially, like, here you go, employer is really where we focused, kind of like installing internships or Johnny Apple seeding, as the saying goes, to make sure that they take root and grow strong, and those opportunities are like annuities and they expand. And what happened was, number one, it was so novel I could not get it valuated. My IP
Mm-hmm.
was, there was just no way to get it to to get that kind of investment that was needed. And it is a manpower, labor intensive type work. So there's only so much I can do from my end. And at the same time, there were a number of grants. And so a year or two into that, from '05 to '07, some opportunities arose. Now you're talking about workforce development, economic development. And I started out with a bridge grant, 375,000 from federal grant, and to do just as what we described. And that was really the origin of founding the nonprofit and being on that side of the equation. And since then, it extends to disadvantaged youth or veterans in transition, but ultimately it's still up to the employers to provide those opportunities. So our role, for literally those 15 years or so, was to create them. Now at the same time, fast forward and rewind a bit to last year and the intersection of COVID and my book coming out last March, sideline the nonprofit. There's not a lot of internships happening. Everything, the virtual world, right? I don't need to convey what everybody knows. And so while at the time in publishing the book, I had not expected to continue on in this field. I expected, okay, this is a book I want to write, earn confidence, all these things I wanted to get out and share. Uh, and and you just, it's one of those principles, which is actually a chapter in the book about going with the flow, swimming with the current. And the way things worked out is that the nonprofit, I can't say it's fully run its course. I still have some work to do. I have a lot to show for it, but it is largely still on the side burner. And so in the meantime, it's like, I'm really enjoying this. I've done a number of these kinds of interviews. I had the microphone for those. I'm like, yeah, I really love this. That led to the podcast. And now, the evolution of it all has led to my developing these courses. And that's where I am right now. So, honestly, I've never been happier. And I'm so glad to be able to continue to make an impact one way or another.
I love it. I could be projecting or interpreting here, but I get the feeling that the stuff that you did with the nonprofit and the direction you took in trying to, help people along, position them more favorably for success, give them more opportunity. I get the feeling that you've taken a lot of those concepts and a lot of the modalities within that, and you're putting that into these new products and this new information that you're now sharing with people.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I have there's a whole, it's interesting. You could see that there was a migration of a fair amount of content, especially around livelihood alignment and all the career resources that I developed. That in my big course is the module 12 is in the final days of it. That's a 29-day course. And so as an add-on, I've got all these, supplements that were already, well established from the internship work. So there is a lot of transition there. And honestly, Andrew, that's life's work there. I mean, I'm a young man still, but 15 years of my prime, I'm certainly determined to have that come back around. For me, it wasn't really only just about installing internship programs at the ground level. There's a whole systemic aspect to it that is very big picture, ripple effect that
Mm,
its time will come, and and
yeah.
and I'll see that through.
And the reason I highlighted that and what I love about this is I think there's people sometimes, um, your thing was not a failure, but some people do experience failures where they'll create something great and the marketing won't be on lock or something else, and they'll discard the information. But you, again, your thing wasn't a failure, but given that there was the whole COVID thing stopping it, you're like, okay, this is still valid. Let me repurpose it in a highly efficient, really great way so that I can continue to share it with people, continue to teach people, continue to use it and have it in my arsenal. And I want to again highlight that because I think there's people out there where you might have created something great, and whether it's COVID stopping it or whether it didn't go off the ground or something else, don't cast that aside, even if you're pivoting and doing something new, because there is a potential that what you've done there can seamlessly flow into whatever new thing you're doing. And again, it sounds like you've been almost intuitively, you're like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. And the really cool thing is, I believe, Matt, that should things line up again where you dive more into the nonprofit and that opportunity is there again, I
Right.
feel like you're going to take higher levels of things you've cultivated here and pour them back in. So there'll be like upgraded versions of the things that people had there.
Yeah, I mean, look, all even just the life experience of it, and all that I've learned. And I have to say, Andrew, if going back to the original part of the story, what I saw as the market need and opportunity turned out to be probably one of the hardest things I could possibly have imagined trying to do, and how much
Mm,
of a frontier the field is. And there's a lot of friction. There are a ton of you would thinks, but both on the employer side and particularly the academic side, what the schools
mm,
don't do. And so there's just such huge gaps there that, I'm just a man. And yet I do feel good about what I have to show for. And yes, there's a lot of transition, but it was one of those things, honestly, from a personal standpoint, that it's in a way just as well that the decision was kind of made for me
mm-hmm.
to have to expand in a different way, because it the current was getting stronger against me. And then suddenly, I'm a willful person, and I think that anyone who can relate to that, and that you have that experience of, I'm really banging my head against the wall here, like I'm doing everything, I'm imposing my will, it's just not going my way. swimming against the current. That's when you really need to just take pause and be like, uh, I'm not sure what it means to turn around, but I'm definitely not going in the right direction.
Mm.
So for me, that was, as a life experience this past year. It's certainly still in process, but it's working out. Like I said, I just feel lighter, and I'm just so pleased to talk about it.
I love it. And, obviously it's evolving, and obviously you'll have a completely new perspective on it even a year from now. But right now, in this moment, things are happening. You're getting feedback from people that are using your programs, that are reading your book, that are listening to your podcast. I'm curious, based on where you are right now in this new pivot,
Right.
are one or two common problems that you find your audience or your customers are encountering, and what's your suggestion for getting them around whatever that challenge might be?
I'm just going to take pause because there's a full spectrum of of answers there. Um, I think that I want to speak a little bit more to your audience from the career and business standpoint
Awesome.
as well. Um, and I is not based on your question. To me, what comes to mind isn't the simplest answer, but I'd like to speak to the concept of inevitability.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
it really, which is a later chapter, and you and I had spoken about this before. I do cover the law of attraction in one chapter, and really just boiling it down. I mean, I'm not a quantum physicist. I'm not, have not explored it nearly to the ends that and of what you're providing and all the value you do. But I summarize that as what we expect tends to happen, and at the same time, recognizing that the law of attraction doesn't can't do the heavy lifting for you. It can't do the things that are effortful. It's not going to write the book. It's not going to make a company successful. It's not going to change your career and align things for you. There's some work to be done there. So, in as much as the way that the law of attraction may be powered by gratitude, very well established, gratitude works. That when we're looking at inevitability, it's about basically setting that goal in and around your somewhat of your why, your legacy, but more specific to something that you can define in a crystal clear way
Mm.
and see that as your point B. And in a business standpoint, I think a lot of the tendency is to be very business plan driven, where you're like, okay, what's my 3, 6, 9 month, 1, 1, 3, 5, 10, and that I'm at point A, and how do I get to point B? But when you're taking these same principles that extend from, in my experience and perception, the law of attraction into the areas like this that are effortful, you have to start at point B. You have to get entirely crystal clear, put aside all friction, whether that's, competitors or, market challenges, and just get into the ideal state and really rewind that from point B, potentially by using dominoes through self-belief. That
Mm.
you have to identify the crystal clear vision that aligns with the self-belief so strongly that it's as if it's already happened in the future, right? So
Um,
it's that self-belief that gives you, as an entrepreneur, that grit and that clarity. And in having that, and in applying, I'm pretty sure you'll agree, some of the principles of the law of attraction, that's going to combine to remove a lot of the friction. That's going to close the and make the line strong, straighter rather, between that point B working backwards to your point A. And I think that one of the challenges, and the same thing goes for career, from an individual standpoint, if you're not speaking to this as an entrepreneur, the same principles apply.
right.
Am I aligned? And and I think that that is a common problem that a lot of people face, um, whether through the paycheck or keeping the lights on scenario. And so I just encourage them to take a lot of the principles that you speak to and extend them through self belief to make those visions inevitably um, manifested.
Yeah. You know what? Just as a quick adjunct to what you were saying there,
Sure.
when I first heard you use the word inevitable, I don't know if I've ever listed this or mentioned this on my podcast before, but I learned the concept of inevitability thinking from an entrepreneur, Evan Pagan. And it's, again, I'm not saying that you're saying this, but a lot of stuff that he was talking about is about setting up the conditions for success. Like, what would have to happen or what would I do to make this outcome inevitable? And
Right.
that could be, whether it's through gratitude, that could be getting clear, that could be simply saying, well, what's within my control and what isn't. Let's work on the stuff that's within my control.
Right.
Let's see where the inspired ideas come and keep working in that direction. That's kind of like, not the exact interpretation I got from you, but some of the thoughts that were popping into my mind as you were describing what you thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of alignment there. I'll have to check it out. I've not heard of him before,
Mm,
but the concept is the same, and uh, it's easy just to kind of be at that point A and really not be able to get the clarity because you're just letting things unfold from where you are, as opposed to going to where you want to be and folding backwards. And I think that paradigm shift, that mental shift, that also leads you to an identity shift in and
hmm
around law of attraction. Who am I then for where I want to go and be that person more now? And that's another principle, of course, that will help things align and fall into place.
I love it. I love it. I wanted to also make sure just to ask you, about your podcast. How's that going? What inspired that piece specifically? What's been, if anything, the one or two biggest insights that you've gotten as you've gone down that path of having an insight and talking to other people?
Well, for one, I love it. It was a post interview like this that the host said to me, "Hey, you ever think about starting your own podcast?" I was like, "No." I was I just it was just never everything I was into. And I'm so glad I did. And a huge coincidence kind of that I followed through on led me to pursue it. And there was a combination of motivations, one of which honestly was the audio book, that knowing that Zisms is just so much of me intertwined, it's not possible to have anyone else narrate it. And at the same time, the thought of me taking my book page by page, word for word, and trying to read it off like an audiobook, like bores me, in the
Mm,
in the thought of like I wouldn't want to do that. So my podcast, is definitely a blend of solo shows and guest episodes, and many of the solo episodes at the onset, this is now coming to its fruition, have been based on chapters from the book. So I'm now converting a number, those chapters into the audiobook, and I'm pulling down those episodes essentially as we speak. The audiobook is just about done. So that was one thing, and I'm really just so grateful and super happy about doing it that way. And I think it's just going to be that much more of an enjoyable experience than how any other audiobook might be produced, was to combine it. But the other thing is just having the opportunity to meet so many amazing people, bringing them onto my podcast, and just having conversations like this, being on your side of the mic. It's a little easier on your side of the mic, so I like it there too. And to be able to hear other people's insights to live by. That's the theme of the show, and that everyone, and getting to know them, we come through that experience in the bottom third of it's very formulaic in how I run the conversation, that it leads up to, okay, let's share your three insights to live by. And I have to say, I'm coming up on show 50 now. I have
wow.
yet to have any guest say really the same one.
Nice.
So, it just goes to speak, those listening right now, it's like, well, what is that advice that you constantly give people? What are those guiding principles that you live by? Those pearls of wisdom, those are your Zisms. And I just think it's a fun exercise for people to recognize, like, yeah, these are some of the things that really have always served me well. And I always enjoy bringing them to the forefront with my guests.
I love it. I love it. I love the direction we're taking this conversation. And now that we're kind of deep into it, because I have a couple more questions for you, but I'm
Yeah.
curious, just based on where we've gone so far, is there anything that you that you want to share with the listener, that you want to make sure that we got to, whether it was a concept or an idea or any advice or insights or anything like that, that you're just inspired to say right now?
Yeah, there's so much. I mean, the book is covers the full as full breadth as I could make it in and around life improvement. So, certainly mindset at the front end, and then well-being, and then we get into relationships and interactions, and then into some of the things we just talked about: gratitude, inevitability, career alignment, livelihood, and legacy, and how do you achieve that. um I I know we'll get to this a little bit more at the end. Like, you're giving me an open-ended question here. What would I like to choose? We were talking about swimming with the current, and so I'm just going to stay on theme
Hmm.
with that, because there's a lot to it. And then maybe let's talk about managing energy for a
Great.
minute too. I think that's very entrepreneur driven too. So I'm just going to go, straight on here in terms of the secret to a healthy relationship, typically, in a marriage, in a domestic relationship, is to know who is the current. And so I'm second time around in my marriage. You heard me mention single dad earlier. My wife Erica, we're together 4 years now, and her second time too. And of course, you learn things through your relationships. And one of the things that we realize in terms of how we complement one another, almost down the middle, is that there really isn't a lot of overlap in terms of who's better at what, who has a stronger inclination to do what. Erica handles the finances. She does the taxes. I could not be happier to have her deal with the receipts. I, you know, I'd like to think I have a say, but at the same time, that's just something that works out for me. And we honestly have not really ever had a major disagreement about
Mm,
anything, because we always know who the current is. And whenever you get in a situation where, of course, in a relationship, each person has, some position about, they're being right, or, but then perception comes into play, and two rights don't necessarily make a wrong. So that would be probably a Zism you could pop out of the book there. But it's always clear as to decide who has more to, who's got more at stake.
mm,
Who's, no, you can
yeah.
never have more than one cook in the kitchen, as it were, in any given situation. And if you approach things like that, as practical as it sounds, it really removes a lot of friction in a domestic relationship. So
Yeah.
that's the other dimension to swimming with the current.
And real quick, before you dive into the next part, just my
Yeah,
interpretation, like what I hear from that
yeah,
is, you could look at it one of two ways. It could either be a power struggle, or both parts of that relationship, both partners can come in with the mature understanding that sometimes you got to lead, sometimes you've got to follow, sometimes you're supposed to lead, sometimes you're supposed to follow, and both are okay, especially when and if you're on the same page. That's what I get out of that.
yeah. And I think it's a lot easier to keep your ego in check when you realize it's, for your own good too, to relinquish some control along the
Hmm.
way. Because if you don't, all you're doing is asking for the friction that then you have to, choke on,
Got it.
for,
Yep.
for whatever you cause.
Exactly.
So I know that sounds pretty straightforward, but I don't know, I've had my share of relationships, and it's taken some time to get to that, and it works. So it's just a thought that I'd love to share. As far as managing energy, there being three facets. You've got personal energy, interpersonal energy, and universal energy. Now, we've talked a little bit about universal. That's where we're looking at law of attraction. Um, when we're talking about personal energy, personally as an entrepreneur, I like to approach time management through energy management. So I'm always mindful, as much as I can be, about what are my most productive times of the day, when I can align the harder work, writing, or doing some numbers or what have you, versus, hey, you know what, we're working at home and I can't write a cohesive sentence, and maybe I should just go do laundry, because that's
Mm,
got to get done too. So a lot of people get hung up on the rigidity of time management, and I've just found it so much more effective to tune in. And again, this is just another grounding principle. A lot of what we speak to and have talked about is about staying in the present. So you got to be present to know naturally how you're feeling at any given time, to not take, so that you don't pick your head up after hours of over stressing yourself, and not being able to have enough energy to go to the gym, or hang out with your kids, or whatever that might be. So approaching things through that lens of personal energy is really important, I think, especially for entrepreneurs, but everyone. Entrepreneurs have more flexibility to be able to do that. Um, Interpersonal energy. So here we're really talking about the fact that we all affect one another. And
Mm.
I think it's very easy to overlook that in and into itself. And that on one hand, we have a personal responsibility in recognizing that we're not going to let our cruddy mood, rub off on everyone, for example, or we're pissed off about something, or, and however that might go, it's contagious. And the same thing goes, especially in and around when you're interacting with others and being mindful of, everyone has bad days, how someone else's energy is affecting you. You just having a little bit more of a conscious effort. Do I need to have shields up with somebody who, might need to lean on me about something, which is what friends are for, but I don't necessarily need to absorb, that any toxicity from someone doing that. And the same thing goes with in and around your friendships and upgrading your tribe. Who
Mm.
are those 5 to 10 people that are closest in your circle, and how do they affect you energetically? I think these are all just critical points in terms of quality of life overall, and in real time.
Yeah, two things I hear. There's one, respecting your own boundaries and being honest with yourself about that, and simultaneously, also thinking about the fact that how you make others feel is a huge impact of where you might go in life, or at least the opportunities that you might have. You might cut off a good opportunity, or you might invite one just by being a person that understands how you're making other people feel. Again, your own boundaries up so that people aren't disrespecting you or robbing you of your energy or sucking your life force or anything like that. But also to those points where you're being honest and you know that they're good intentioned, how you're going to make them feel and how you're going to serve them and help them have a better day.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better, Andrew. And I think in tying it together in and around energy and law of attraction, and earned confidence, when you look at the negativity, let's say, of worrying, and the notion in and around what we've talked about with law of attraction in terms of what we expect tends to happen. And if you then apply that to worrying, and worrying being essentially setting an expectation of something that you do not want to happen, then if there naturally, as I'm certain you'll agree that there's
Mm-hmm.
some truth to the law of attraction, then you are that energy in and around your worry can have a causal effect for what it is that you essentially do not want to happen, which is another key reason not to worry and just have the
Yes.
earned confidence to stay present. So I thought I'd
Love it.
tie those loose ends.
I love it. Now, a couple minutes ago, you kind of noted the open-endedness of my question, and hearing where we've gone since then, I'm really glad that I asked because, at least my perspective, not blowing smoke, you seem to have a really good instinct for taking a conversation in a really productive, healthy way. So I've no doubt that people, even hearing this, might want to connect with you further after this interview. With that in mind, if people did want to connect, what would be the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, I love it. Certainly that's my goal, is to impact as many as possible. And there are a number of ways that I hope to do that. For one, naturally, my website, mattzinman.com, there are a number of free resources there straight away. Topics we didn't necessarily get into in and around well-being, a depression defeater, a self-care report card, and a free video series. And the other thing, honestly, Andrew, just because of where I am in my progress with the courses, I have a 7-day course which is called a mindset reset, and those 7 days are actually also the first 7 days of the bigger course, which is called a life upgrade, which is
Mm,
29 days. And I am beta testing the mindset reset for free.
nice.
So happy to have anyone in your audience who is in the in a timing and position where they can dedicate about an hour a day for 1 week to themselves. Seems, I think, reasonable.
They're
Uh,
worth it.
and I know for your show notes, but I'll just say mattzinman.com/beta, BETA, and they can apply there, and we'll give them free access to the course and impact another life, whoever decides to go for it. So please feel welcome to register for that, and thank you for the opportunity to share that.
Nice. Very generous of you. Really, I'm always pumped to share cool free stuff with my audience. So thank you for doing that. Mindset reset. We were talking. It's so funny, and I was working on a project with somebody else, and I was thinking along those lines, like, "Oh, mindset reset." So you beat me to the punch on that one, and I note that because it's such a great title, it's such a great concept. It's great to capture the mind of where it's going. So I'm sure whoever takes you up on that and goes through those 7 days, I'm sure they're going to get a nice experience. So awesome. So glad that we're sharing that. So glad that you are sharing that.
Of course.
With that said, before we wrap up, one question that I always like to try and ask my guests, and I have a funny feeling I'm going to get a nice answer from you here, is if you can go back in time, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 25 years, anytime in the past, and give an earlier version of yourself any piece of advice. It could be life advice, it could be business advice, it could be anything. What would that advice be to that younger version of yourself?
I'm just going to say the first thing that comes to mind, just because it comes into parenting advice. As a single dad, and I haven't, I have one son, and he's awesome. You take that the right way, but I think that we made things too easy for him. And what I wish I had have done more from an earlier age, and just the single parenting advice, is to say, go figure it out.
Hmm.
Go figure it out, a lot more than I did for him, and made it too easy for him. And I think that now he's got a little bit of remedial in and around life skills, that because I made things too easy for him, he should he's going to hear this, but we're all work in progress. And
Hmm.
I think that I think that he would be better off, and I would be better off, if I said, go figure it out every chance I could have.
Wow. What I think is really interesting about that conversation, to memory, you're the first one that's ever answered in service to a different human being rather than yourself, which is really cool. So
Thanks.
if he's hearing this right now and
Thank you.
and taking it the wrong way, I would personally be complimented, because like, wow, my dad's got this one wish of going back in time and helping himself. He's helping me instead. So I think that's pretty cool. And I've got to say, I would never wish any difficulties on me, but there are certain times that I wish I was forced to figure out certain things myself. Way younger years, like my really formative, early teenage years. I wish I kind of had that as well. So I totally get what you're saying there, and I definitely appreciate that answer.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's just, you started to say, it's like, I always ask my guests this one question. I'm like, I'm bracing over here. What are you going to ask me? It's
What's he
like,
gonna throw at me? What curveball do we got
yeah,
coming
right,
here?
exactly. So, I just go, that's the first thing that came to my mind. So thank you for
Yeah,
letting me share that and everything else. And, thanks to your audience for tuning in with us. And I hope that, our conversation, has brought the value we've hoped.
I really think it has. And Matt, thanks you again so much for bringing this insight, bringing this wisdom, bringing this perspective, because this is what we need more of. We need people that have kind of lived through it. They've fought their battles. They've got their scars. They've got their insight and their wisdom, and they're sharing with other people. So thank you for taking time out today to do that with my audience. I really do appreciate it.
The pleasure's mine. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks again, Matt. That was awesome. I really appreciate you coming on, sharing all your wisdom. Guys, you definitely want to check out mattzinman.com. And while you're at it, try mattzinman.com/beta so you can get a free shot at his Mindset Reset program. I highly recommend it. Again, you can tell he really knows his stuff, so I recommend you check him out. Also, as long as I'm giving links out, quick reminder, you can check out my book, The Last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read, by going to lastlawofattractionbook.com, which auto forwards to the Amazon listing. Or you can feel free to go to youtube.com/Andrew Cap. And with that said, thanks again, as always, for listening. Thanks for checking the show out. I hope you liked today's guest. And stay tuned. We've got more on the way. So I will see you next time. Thank you for listening to Shatter the Mold at www.shatterthemoldpodcast.com. My name is Andrew S. Kaplan. My name is Andrew S. Kaplan, and it's time to shatter the mold.